Hey, I'm just here creating content that I'd want to watch myself. If you're into real, simple, and honest videos, go ahead and subscribe.
I spent 31 years as a family crisis counselor. I have sat across from women with bruised wrists and hollow eyes and helped them find words for things they had stopped believing anyone would hear. I have held the hands of mothers who drove 3 hours in the middle of the night because their daughters finally called. I have written reports that sent men to prison and reports that kept families together when they still could be. My job, for 3 decades, was to walk into the worst moments of other people's lives and not fall apart. So when I tell you that I almost missed what was happening to my own daughter, I need you to understand exactly what that means. I am not a woman who misses things. I notice the way a person shifts their weight when they say their husband's name. I notice when a grown woman asks permission to order her own coffee. I notice the pause before the answer that comes a half-second too late to be genuine. I notice all of it. I almost missed it anyway. My daughter's name is Claire. She has her father's laugh, wide and sudden, like it surprises her every time. She has my eyes, which people have always called serious, though I prefer the word watchful. Claire grew up in a house full of books and dinner table arguments, and the expectation that she would always speak her mind. I made sure of that. Her father and I both did. We raised her to take up space. She was 32 when she met my son-in-law. His name is Derek. He was 36, a project manager for a commercial real estate firm, steady job, nice apartment in the city, the kind of man who brings flowers the first time he comes to dinner without being told. He was attentive to Claire in a way that looked, from the outside, like devotion. He remembered the name of her college roommate. He asked follow-up questions about her work. He listened when she talked, or at least he appeared to. My husband passed 4 years before Claire met Derek, and I think I should be honest about that, because grief has a way of making you want things to be fine. It has a way of making you look at a man who seems to love your child and decide, quickly, quietly, that you can stop worrying. I wanted to stop worrying. I had been carrying worry alone for 4 years, and Derek looked like relief. The first Thanksgiving they were together, Derek made the mashed potatoes from scratch and called Claire my girl when he handed her a dish, and I thought, this is a good man. I thought, she is going to be all right. They got engaged 14 months after they started dating. Claire called me on a Tuesday morning. She was crying the happy kind of tears, the kind where you can't quite get the full sentence out. I drove to her apartment that afternoon with a bottle of wine, and we sat on her kitchen floor and talked until almost midnight. She told me he made her feel like the most important person in any room they were ever in together. She said he always knew what she needed before she said it. I remember thinking that was romantic. I remember thinking that was love. I noticed the first thing about 3 months after the engagement, and I filed it away in a part of my brain I wasn't ready to open. We were all at a birthday dinner for Claire's cousin. A big table, lots of noise, and Claire made a joke, one of her good ones, the kind she'd been making her whole life, a little sharp, a little self-aware. Everyone laughed. I laughed. Derek did not laugh. He put his hand over hers on the table, and the way he did it was not affectionate. It was a lid. She stopped talking. I told myself she was tired. I told myself it was nothing. The second thing I noticed was smaller and harder to name. Claire started asking me, when we made plans, whether Derek had anything going on that weekend. Not whether she had anything going on, whether he did. It's a small thing. It sounds like consideration, but I had been doing this work long enough to know that consideration and permission are not the same thing, and the distance between them is everything. I did not say anything. I am not proud of that. But I told myself I was being professional, seeing patterns that weren't there, transferring my caseload onto my own family. I told myself I owed my daughter the benefit of the doubt. What I actually owed her was the truth, and I chose the easier thing instead. They got married the following spring. Small ceremony, 100 people, Claire in a dress she'd found at a vintage shop and altered herself, barefoot by the end of the reception because she said heels were a form of punishment. She danced with me to an Etta James song and put her head on my shoulder for a moment, and I felt her breathe out in a way that was almost a sigh, and I thought I understood it as happiness. Later, I would wonder if it was something else entirely. The first year of marriage, I saw my daughter less. She explained it differently every time Derek had family in from out of town. She was working late on a project. They were trying to establish their own routines as a couple and needed some space to do that. Each explanation was reasonable. Together, they formed a wall. When I did see her, she had started doing this thing with her sentences. She would begin a thought and then stop, recalibrate, and finish with something softer than what she had started to say, like she had learned to edit herself in real time, like there was a version of Claire that now lived one draft behind the one she showed the world. I called her one evening just to talk. We used to talk on the phone for an hour, easy, the way we always had. That night she spoke in short answers, and I heard, in the background, the particular quality of a silence that comes from someone listening. 20 minutes into the call, she said she had to go. She said Derek needed her help with something. I sat with the phone in my hand for a long time after that. I started paying closer attention. Not intrusively, I was careful about that. I knew from my work that moving too fast, confronting too directly, could cause a woman to defend the very situation she was trapped in, because admitting the truth required admitting everything she had lost to get there. So, I watched, and I waited, and I kept my face neutral when things did not add up. Claire had always had a best friend named Josie, since the 3rd grade, the kind of friendship that is more like family. By the 2nd year of Claire's marriage, Josie and I had started talking more than Claire and I did. Not because Josie was telling me anything. She was too loyal for that. But because she was clearly not seeing Claire either, and we were both pretending not to find that strange. The Christmas of the 2nd year, Derek's mother came to stay for 2 weeks. Her name is Gloria, and I want to be precise about her, because imprecision would be a kindness she does not deserve. Gloria is the kind of woman who presents herself as frank. She will tell you that. Herself, she will say, "I'm just honest. I say what I think, but frankness is not the same as cruelty," and Gloria had confused them so long she could no longer see the difference. She had raised Derek alone after his father left, and she had built that fact into a mythology of suffering that excused everything she had ever done and everything her son had ever become. The first time I met Gloria, she looked at Claire's apartment, the one Claire had lived in for 6 years before Derek moved in, the one she had decorated herself, that held her books and her plants and her grandmother's quilt on the couch, and said, "Well, it's cozy." She said it the way you say something is cozy when you mean it is small and insufficient and you expected better. Claire laughed it off. I noticed that she laughed it off. By the 2nd Christmas, Gloria had graduated from comments about the apartment to comments about Claire, her cooking, her ambitions, the fact that she and Derek did not yet have children. Gloria delivered these observations at the dinner table, pleasantly, in the tone of someone offering helpful information. And Derek did not stop her. He never stopped her. Sometimes he nodded. Once, I saw him smile. I was at their house for a Sunday dinner in February, the year Claire and Derek had been married almost 3 years. It was an ordinary evening, or it was supposed to be. Claire had cooked. She had been cooking every meal since Gloria's visit. Derek had apparently decided this was her responsibility, which was new, because before the marriage, Claire had been the first to say she found cooking tedious, and there was no shame in takeout. She had made a roast, and it was good, and she put it on the table with the careful expression of someone who had learned to read the room before they offered anything. We were eating. We were talking about something ordinary. And then Derek said, in a voice that was perfectly level, too level, that the roast was dry. Claire did not look up from her plate. He said it again, not louder. The same volume, the same flat tone, the same certainty that this was a simple statement of fact and not an act of war. He said the meat was dry, the potatoes were better last time, and he wasn't trying to be critical. He was just being honest. I watched my daughter. She said she was sorry. She said she'd try to do better next time. She set it to her plate. I set down my fork. I did it quietly. I looked across the table at my son-in-law, and he looked back at me with an expression of perfect innocence, the expression of a man who has never once been told that what he was doing was wrong, and has therefore decided it must not be. I said, "The roast is wonderful, Claire." Derek looked at me for a moment. Then he picked up his fork and continued eating. The table moved on. Claire moved on. But her hand, when she reached for her water glass, was not entirely steady. I drove home that night, and I sat in my driveway for a long time. I was not sitting there because I didn't know what I was seeing. I was sitting there because I did know, and knowing meant I could no longer choose not to act, and acting meant what I was about to do was going to be hard. Over the following weeks, I did what I had done for 31 years. I gathered information. I did not gather it loudly. I called Josie and I asked her, gently, when she had last spent time with Claire, and the long pause before her answer told me everything I needed. I had lunch with my daughter, and I watched the way she checked her phone, and I noticed twice that she typed a reply before we had finished talking, and I noticed that her expression after each reply was not relief, but something more like a student who has just given the correct answer on a test. I asked Claire one afternoon when we were walking in the neighborhood whether she was happy. Just that. No preamble. She turned to me and smiled and said, "Of course she was great. Everything was great." But she said it the way people say they're fine. When fine is the only safe option, when fine is a door they've locked from the inside because they can't let anyone see what's on the other side. I said, "You know you can tell me anything." She said, "I know, Mom." She changed the subject and I let her, because I understood that she was not ready yet, and the worst thing I could do was push her to a place she hadn't chosen. But I also made a decision in that moment. I made it quietly, the way I make most decisions that matter. I began making preparations. I called a family law attorney I had worked alongside for 15 years. I didn't ask her to do anything yet. I just described the situation in broad terms and asked her what documentation would be useful if things escalated. She told me. I listened carefully, and I wrote nothing down because I did not need to. I have a very good memory. I called a woman I knew who ran a domestic violence advocacy organization in the city. We had collaborated on cases for years. I told her I needed to understand the current landscape resources, legal protections, shelter options if needed, the procedural steps in this particular county. She talked for 40 minutes. I absorbed all of it. I told no one else. Not yet. Then, in March, a Saturday in March, one of those early spring days that hasn't decided yet whether it wants to be warm, Derek's company had some kind of event, a dinner for clients, and Claire called me that morning to ask if I wanted to come over for lunch while Derek was getting ready. I said yes. When I arrived, Derek was upstairs, and Claire and I sat in the kitchen, and for about 20 minutes, it was almost like it used to be. She was herself. She laughed twice, real laughs, the wide, sudden ones. Then Derek came downstairs. He came into the kitchen, and he looked at Claire and he said, in that same level voice, that she was wearing the wrong thing for the evening. The event was formal. What she had on was not formal. Why hadn't she paid attention to the invitation? Claire looked down at her dress. It was a perfectly beautiful dress. She said she thought it was okay. She said she'd read the invitation. She said he talked over her. Calmly. The way someone talks over a child who is offering an irrelevant opinion. He said she embarrassed him at these things. He said she never listened. He said he had told her about the dress code. He turned to the refrigerator to get something, and then turned back and said, like an afterthought, like the least important part of what he was saying, that she didn't need to come if she was going to look like that. Claire looked at me, and I saw, in that look, everything she had been carrying, the weight of it, the years of it, the way a person looks when they have been told for so long that their own perception is wrong, that they have stopped trusting themselves to know what they know. She looked at me like she was asking a question she was afraid to ask out loud. She looked at me like she was asking whether what was happening was real. I looked back at her steadily. I did not panic. That is the thing about my work. You learn very quickly that panic serves no one. Panic is a luxury. Clarity is a tool. I said, Claire, why don't you go upstairs and take a minute? You look beautiful, but if you want to change, take your time. Derek looked at me. I looked at him. He made the calculation that most men like him make, that I was an older woman, that I was being reasonable, that this was not a moment worth escalating, and he went back to whatever he was doing. Claire went upstairs. I stayed at the kitchen counter. I did not look at Derek. I took out my phone and I sent 2 text messages, one to the attorney, one to the advocate. Both said the same thing. I need to move forward. Both of them knew exactly what that meant. What happened after that did not happen in one day. I want to be honest about that, because stories like this sometimes get told as though the rescue was a single dramatic moment, and it wasn't. It was careful. It was patient. It was built one piece at a time, the way I had built cases for 31 years, because the goal was not the most satisfying conclusion. The goal was the most durable one. The attorney walked me through what Claire would need to document. I found, gently and over several conversations, ways to explain to my daughter without telling her what to do, because she had had enough of that there were options, that there was support, that her clarity about her own experience was not something anyone could take from her unless she let them. Josie was involved. Once I brought her in. She had been waiting, I think, for permission. She wept on the phone when I called her, not from sadness but from the particular relief of finally being allowed to be worried. Claire came to me on a Thursday in April. She called at 7 in the morning and she said, Mom, I think I need help, and those were the most important 6 words I'd heard in years. I said, I know. I've been ready. She was quiet for a moment. She asked how long I had known. I told her a version of the truth that was honest, without being cruel to myself. Long enough, and not soon enough, and we were going to fix that starting today. She moved in with me that weekend while Derek was out of town for work. The attorney had already filed the paperwork. The locks at my house were already changed, not because Derek knew where I lived and posed a direct threat, but because control requires access, and I was removing access. Derek's mother called me. Once. She called me, and she used that same warm, frank tone, the tone that was not frankness but its dressed-up cousin, and she told me I was interfering in a marriage, that my daughter was sensitive, that Derek loved Claire, and I was blowing things out of proportion. She said her son had a temper sometimes, but that was just the way men were, and a wife had to understand how to handle that. I let her finish. I had learned, over 31 years, to let people finish, and then I told her, quietly and without drama, that I had 31 years of case documentation, 2 professional relationships with credentialed experts who had reviewed my daughter's situation, an attorney who had already filed, and a very, very clear recollection of everything I had personally witnessed in that kitchen. I told her that my daughter was with me, that she was safe, and that Gloria was welcome to call me again when she had something different to say. She did not call again. The divorce took 9 months. There were difficult days. There were days when Claire doubted herself, when the thing that long-term control does to a person's sense of their own truth made her wonder if she had exaggerated, if she had overreacted, if she owed it to the marriage to try harder. On those days, I sat with her the way I had sat with other women for 3 decades, and I did not tell her what to feel. I just made sure she knew she was not alone in the room. What I want to say to you, and I mean you specifically, wherever you are watching from, is that the signs are quieter than you think they will be. They are not always shouting and bruises. They are a hand placed over yours that is not affectionate. They are a sentence edited before it finishes. They are a daughter who asks whether her husband is busy before she answers whether she is free. They are small, and they are cumulative, and they are designed to be invisible, which is why they work. And the other thing I want to say is this: being good at seeing these things in other people's lives does not make you immune to missing them in your own. Grief makes you want relief. Love makes you want to believe. And the people who do this are very, very good at making it look like something else. But I had 31 years, and 2 text messages, and a daughter who still had enough of herself left to make 1 phone call on a Thursday morning. She runs now, in the early mornings before work, the way she used to before she was married, when she still lived in the apartment with the grandmother's quilt. She started again, about 2 months after she moved in with me. The first morning I heard her come back in and start the coffee. I stood in the kitchen doorway and looked at her in her running shoes, with her hair pulled back and her cheeks red from the cold, and she looked back at me, and she smiled that laugh, that wide, sudden one that still surprises her, and I thought, there she is. I have been waiting for her. She has her own apartment now. It's not far. We have dinner every Sunday, and she orders whatever she wants, and she talks without editing herself. And sometimes she stays so late, we end up watching television on the couch, and she falls asleep under the grandmother's quilt, the way she used to when she was small. She told me, a few months ago, that she was glad I didn't push her faster than she was ready to go. She said she'd needed to come to it herself. I told her I knew. She looked at me for a moment and said, "How did you know?" And I said, "Because I know you." What I did not say, though it is also true, because I have been watching you your whole life, because watching you is one of the great privileges of mine, because no matter how long this took, and no matter what it cost, and no matter how many times I sat in a parked car at night asking myself what I had missed, and when none of that changes the ending is her voice on a Thursday morning. The ending is the red cheeks, and the running shoes, and the coffee, and the laugh. The ending is that she's here. If something in this story felt familiar, if you heard something in it that you recognize from your own life or from someone you love, please don't carry it alone. Tell someone. Tell a friend. Tell a professional. Tell a hotline. Tell your mother. Tell anyone. You do not have to have it all figured out before you reach out. You just have to make one move, one call, one text, one sentence that says, "I think I need help." That's how it starts. Thank you for being here with me today. I want to know, what city are you watching from? And if this story reached you, if it touched something real, please share it. Someone who needs it might be one click away.